Hello, it's Andrew. Welcome to Collab Learning. Today's special is the rise and fall of the German army on the Eastern and Western fronts, part 2. If you like my work, please give me a like, subscribe to this channel, check the playlists, and support me on Patreon and PayPal. Additional links and information can be found in the description box below. See the sidebar for a list of the best books and sources on the subject. In part 1 we covered the combat dynamics, combined arms warfare, and the cataclysm of the German Red Army in the 1941 campaigns. We analyzed the final damage done to the German Army and Air Force. Both sides were mauled into a degenerated state. By the end of 1941, the pre-war Red Army was smashed. The Red Army had suffered millions of human losses. Two-thirds of the Soviet chemical industry and most of their electronics industry was occupied by Axis forces, leading to a permanent collapse in ammunition and electronics output. Among the millions of Red Army missing and dead were countless pre-war officers and men. This includes specialists that were difficult to replace, such as entire artillery regiments and signals units. They also lost hundreds of thousands of motor vehicles, which damaged motorization in the Red Army to an extent that they never really recovered in the war. However, the silver lining was that they retained their heavy industry and their ability to produce a vast quantity of military equipment like artillery, tanks, anti-tank guns, and aircraft. The Soviet home front was mobilized for total war. Allied Lend-Lease would start to flow in greater and greater numbers to partially make up for critical shortages of locomotives, motor vehicles, explosives, and electronics. The massive blow the Red Army suffered in 1941 created a situation where a new Red Army was continuously built and reformed with undertrained divisions and tank brigades that were tactically inferior to those wielded by the Germans. Their only retribution was that they had a vast superiority in force generation. With this flow of new combat forces, they had sheer weight of numbers of infantry and tanks on their side, which could absorb the high losses. Ruthless mobilization of the Soviet people had stopped the Axis and permanently damaged the best version of the German military that had fought in World War II. For the Soviet Union, they would embark on a long series of painful and massive military reforms that would completely transform their army by the summer of 1943. At the same time, Germany would work to repair its army, and a partial recovery process began. In half a year, they would repair 1 out of 3 of their army groups. New infantry and panzer divisions were shipped to the front line. Damaged divisions were withdrawn and rebuilt. Reinforcements of men and material were sent. Army Group South was made assault capable again. It was remobilized and reinforced with 9 battalions of infantry per division. But despite this, there was ultimately not enough resources left to repair Army Groups Center and North. In the spring of 1942, both the German Air Force and Army had recovered enough to perform powerful combined arms operations, this time smaller and at the level of armies rather than army groups. The capture of the Soviet Second Shock Army, the German victory at the Second Battle of Kharkov, and Manstein's victories in the Crimea demonstrated that devastating operational scale victories were still possible with the help of the Luftwaffe's air fleets, in particular Air Fleet 4 with its 1,000 aircraft. This fleet specialized in massive close air support and was composed of bombers, dive bombers, strategic and tactical reconnaissance, heavy fighters, and fighter aviation. 1942 marked the transition of German air power from deep interdiction of enemy supply chains and air bases towards concentrated close air support for ground operations. The spring victories cleared the way for Operation Case Blue in 1942 with the reorganized and rebuilt Southern Army Group. As the invasion shifted to the Caucasus and the Battle of Stalingrad, we can see a demonstration of German combined arms at its peak performance, with mass close air support of up to 3,000 sorties a day. Ground forces remain capable, with units like the 24th Panzer Division fighting skillfully with combined arms. The division provides a good impression of the ideal organizational form. Like many panzer divisions that invaded France in 1940 and Russia in 1941, the division was reinforced with specialized assets. This included all or some of the following: Special Operations Forces in the form of Russian-speaking Brandenburg Commandos, bridging columns, additional engineers, infantry, flak, and artillery units, and most importantly, attached Air Force liaison teams to coordinate airstrikes in support of ground forces. To learn more about this unit, the link to my review of Death of a Leaping Horseman, the 24th Panzer Division in Stalingrad, is provided in the description box below. Ultimately, the 1942 campaigns ended in failure, just like Operation Barbarossa. Unlike the previous year, most of the Soviet forces escaped the biggest German encirclement attempts, with rapid retreats leading to a strategic failure of Case Blue. The loss of the once powerful German Sixth Army and the mauling of both Army Groups A and B were disastrous for the Axis both politically and militarily. In particular, the German infantry arm was heavily weakened by the 1942 campaign, and was never the same again on the Eastern Front. From now on, the German Infantry Division would spend the rest of the war largely in the defense, with increasingly poor maintenance of combat capability. They lost a lot of mobility and would be lucky to have 6 infantry battalions at best. In reality, they typically operate with the equivalent of just 1 to 4 battalions of infantry, always struggling to survive. For the German panzer forces, a disturbing development also appeared in the winter of 1942 and 1943. They started to encounter new types of Soviet armored infantry units that were much more tactically capable than the tactically inferior units they had fought until now. They had better logistics and were more mobile, trained with new skills learned in the war, and were led by battle-proven commanders. Units like the next generation Soviet Tank Corps could fight peer-to-peer against the numerous weakened German Panzer divisions and stop them in their tracks. Unlike the early Tank Corps, the new ones were capable of maneuver warfare and had a much better supply capability and sustainability in combat operations. The new Soviet infantry divisions also appeared in the winter of 1942, were also the product of reform and attacked more capably than in the summer. They had also become smaller and more mobile, with better command and control. They were more concentrated in weapons and more capable of strong defensive actions. The performance of Soviet military engineering and artillery also improved that winter, consistent with how ruthless social Darwinism on the battlefield was selecting and promoting a new generation of Soviet Red Army officers and specialists. These men proved that they were capable of successfully adapting from experience. In encirclement of the Sixth Army and the subsequent Soviet winter counteroffensive, the Soviet armies showed the world that they had finally learned how to organize and conduct the complex art of large-scale combined arms maneuver warfare. I highly recommend Colossus Reborn by David Glantz to learn more about Soviet military reform. This concludes Part 2. In Part 3, we'll discuss the combat dynamics and developments of the year 1943 on the Eastern Front. Please put your thoughts and ideas in the comment section. They always make a great conversation. I hope you find this special to be informative. Thanks for watching.